So to start, I have an open question for the entire panel. I was wondering if everyone could tell us what do you think are the biggest challenges that cities and states in Africa face in developing smart energy and water infrastructure? So the biggest challenges from your point of view. Don't all jump in at the same time.
Okay, let me start, if that's okay. I think from a water perspective, scarcity of water first. And also water is a local issue. You need to have water resources near your population. You can't transport water long distances because it's uneconomic because of the infrastructure. So you need to develop that infrastructure close to your source. And even in a country where maybe there's an abundant supply of water, a large lake, reservoir in one place, you can also have rural communities that really have huge issues of water poverty, and it's very difficult to reconcile that. You also need the right technology. So you need to be able to treat that scarce water, which may be of varying water quality. So you need to have the right technology, whether it's desalinating seawater or treating very complicated, difficult water like here in Kigali from the river. In terms of, we've developed a big project here in Kigali to supply the water. And there have been some challenges specific to the region. One has been transportation of goods inwards has been complicated for us. We've had containers held at ports for 75 or 80 days, and we're under tight deadlines to build the plant and deliver the water to the population. So there have been some challenges that you would expect in developing regions. But we've been able, by working in partnership, to overcome most of those. And we've learned a lot. So for our next projects, we're now actually going to manufacture as much as we can locally, which is great for the economy. So we're putting in a pipe manufacturing plant because of the problems that we had with bringing pipes in from outside. And we're going to manufacture the pipes here in Rwanda and then be in control of that transportation to other countries in the region.
I can attempt to speak on the energy side. When you're thinking about smart city development from an energy perspective, it's important to think about the technological obstacles and then the more kind of people-related obstacles, so they're things that are more nuanced. From a technological perspective, when you're thinking about energy, there's really three components. There's the generation, the transmission, and the storage. For a smart city, it's critical to have on-demand, high-touch, customized energy that's not only available, but essentially embedded, because when you're thinking about data sensors, when you're thinking about constantly powering a city on the go, for example, you can't be worrying about changing batteries. You know, you cannot design that solution properly, that smart solution properly, if you cannot rely on the power being there and rely on the power being available in almost an on-demand perspective. The problem that we have is that we're attempting to take old school ways of generating and transmitting and storing power, or really the lack thereof of storage, towards a new way of thinking about urbanization and cities, which are much more insular, much more integrated. To me, the key is really looking at more decentralized systems. Instead of going large, going small, going focused and very specific. So you're going to be looking at a lot more microgrids. You're going to be looking at a lot more integrated systems in terms of how we get the power that we're getting. You're going to be looking at systems that in and of themselves are smart in terms of generating the power that's needed and not just pushing generation to a max to the extent that you can't even store the power that's being generated in the first place. From the non-technical side, when we think about energy for smart cities, it's really important to understand that you have to keep in mind the government and the policies, the business models, and the extent to which individuals can push forward those business models, and of course the individuals themselves and the extent to which they feel like they're part of the development of this new infrastructure. From the policy perspective, it's going to be vital for governments to really be open to new innovative technologies and not just the established renewable energy technologies that are really more fit for the old way of doing things, large hydro, large solar, and whatnot. From the business model perspective, it's going to be critical to bring in external investors, and for the government and other nonprofit organizations within the city to invest in entrepreneurs, because it's this really vicious cycle that you get if you want to build a business, but you need energy to build it, and then you need money for the energy, but you don't have any money because you weren't able to do the business. You can see what I'm saying. So there needs to be a first and foremost step forward in terms of financing for these new innovative ideas and business models. And then I think it's also critical, whenever thinking about this infrastructure and thinking about the design of these cities, to constantly include the community and the individuals that were there first, and to be constantly doing community stakeholder analyses. When you miss those, you'll often find that projects don't get completed. You'll often find that projects aren't accepted, or if they're completed and accepted at first, they're later kind of become torn down because the people of that community don't understand how to maintain the project. They don't see a value of the project, and at least they don't feel like they were included in it.
If I may add on some of the challenges, just to highlight, I think if you look on it from a continental perspective broadly, is that we've got just about over 7 countries that have got over 50% of electrification, and then majority of the countries are still sitting about just over 20% electrification. And then even where you're sitting with electrification, one of the challenges you have, you're still sitting with an issue of a centralized generation, and then which then demands a long distance transmission. And then I think the issues that you find there, because of generally lack of energy, is that once you generate and transmit, then you are just hoping that all of what you've generated is being consumed, reaches the end user. And then there are issues of energy leakages, which means you might be generating a particular percentage, and then ultimately the consumers only receive almost about half of that. So those are the kind of issues that obviously is important to think about from an energy perspective. And also we are now on the point that's talked about on the renewable. I think a lot of, obviously, that Africa needs to think about is the whole issue to say, how can I generate energy at any point and be able to inject into the grid at any point in time to be able to service that. And those are the things that are bigger challenges with the kind of the infrastructure we are having today. The other issues, obviously, about the awareness. I think our consumers out there, with what they have today, it's just about consuming, and then you hope the end of the month when you get the bill is right. And you never know how to influence your behavior, and you never know what consumes more of your energy, and then how to spread your energy, and to be able to make sure that we can be able to save on that. So summarizing is that obviously I think we still have a major issue in terms of how do we know what we consume so that we can save, and then be able to plan better to be able to generate more. And then on the issue of the water, I think some of the things that we are seeing as well is that is the whole issue as you go into the rural areas. I think one of the things that as we see from the SDGs, one of the major challenges that contributes to poverty is the lack of clean water. And then I think that is a major challenge, because the technology is not out there to be able to tell the people what is the quality of the water. And if you look on some of the water diseases, infant mortality, and those kind of things that get impacted by the lack of quality of water on that, and sometimes with all the infrastructure as well, because of lack of sensing, people can consume a lot of water and then be affected, and which could have been avoided. And also water suffers from the same issue as energy, about leakage. And I think now when you look on the number of stats about how much water is treated and clean, but how much people receives at home, very big difference in terms of that. And sometimes you hear some of the countries that you cannot be able to drink water, but the issue is not about the clean part from the source. It's about what happens with it and before it reaches where it should be consumed. So those are the kind of things that I may summarize from my side on that.
Gets me leads me, we'll go back to you, but that's a good lead to the question I had for Mr. Bauer about the role in historically water systems, water infrastructure has been a centralized endeavor where you have a large central plant with a lot of pipes going out into individual consumers. what do you think is the role of centralized versus decentralized water infrastructure in smart cities in the continent?
I think it's going to be a mixture of both. Here in Kigali, we've got a central water system which has just been put in, and we're building out a distribution network to take that to people's homes and to businesses, and that works very well. From a smart city perspective, we're connecting the water network with sensors so that we can detect high...
Ladies and gentlemen, please be informed that the Face the Gorilla session will take place in Editol at 5:30 p.m. Smart Talk Spotlight On will take place in the auditorium at 5:45 p.m. Developing an integrated smart water and energy solutions for communities will take place in MH2 at 5:30 p.m.
We're in the right place. Good.
Yeah.
So, as I say, I think it's both, and we're linking our network with sensors so that we can monitor in our control room large unexpected uses of water. So then that will tell us where there's a leak, and we can pinpoint it and go out and repair it. And the issue you raised about leakage is really twofold. One is you don't want to have water leaking from your system.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be informed that the Face the Gorilla session will take place in Editol now. The Smart Talk Spotlight On will take place in the auditorium at 5:45 p.m. Developing integrated smart water and energy solutions for communities will take place in MH2 now.
15 minutes ago. See what happened.
So the issue of leakage is not only the waste of water and the waste of resources and energy that it takes to produce and to pump it, but also is you get a depressurization of the system, and therefore you can suck in contaminants which then go directly to the consumer. So being able to monitor that.
Please be informed that the Face the Gorilla session will take place in Editol now. Smart Talk Spotlight On will take place in the auditorium at 5:45 p.m. Developing integrated smart water and energy solutions for communities will take place in MH2. It's taking place actually now.
So that's centralized systems. And with a big centralized plant, you can also have a high degree of automation for the treatment as well. So the plant that's feeding Kigali has 2 operators. The previous one had 38 because of the control systems and the automation that's been put into that plant. But then you look on the other side and look at decentralized systems, and I mentioned that water is a local issue. So a central system works well here for Kigali for clean water. But for rural areas or smaller cities, then you can put the same technology inside, say, a shipping container and transport that into the local villages and small towns where they've got local water supplies and get water immediately to the people without having to invest a lot of money in big infrastructure, which can then decay over time and is difficult to maintain. But then that gives a challenge in terms of connectivity, because you want to be able to monitor those from a central point and understand how each of those plants in the rural supplies are performing. And I don't know if anybody's had a chance, but as you walk into the exhibition centre, there's a couple of containers up behind the food tent, which have got, one has a water treatment plant installed inside and the other has a wastewater treatment plant inside. So you're basically building them in a factory under quality conditions, you can test them, and then you basically ship them to where they're used and get them up and running within a matter of days. So it's a very efficient process, really going...
Out here?
Yes, they're out there. And it goes directly to the point of impact, but of course we need the technology to be able to monitor and control those. But that's not just for rural supplies, because that can apply in a city as well. And thinking again of Kigali as we're here, Kigali needs to uprate its wastewater treatment system, and the right solution for that might not be one large plant and very expensive large infrastructure to connect to it, particularly because of the topography here. You want to be able to have that waste going by gravity rather than needing to consume energy and having it pumped. So the answer here would probably be to have 4 or 5 smaller wastewater treatment plants with infrastructure from the different districts feeding that plant. And again, that requires some challenges from ICT in terms of control and monitoring. So it's very much both, and it can be different on the water side and the wastewater side.
And the energy side. Do you want to say something, Mr. Mami, on...
Oui, Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, les pays, les villes, les communautés africaines sont confrontées à une vague d'urbanisation, à un défi d'industrialisation. Et quand on parle de l'urbanisation, l'un des défis majeurs, c'est comment créer les conditions pour ces populations qui migrent vers les centres urbains. Comment développer les infrastructures de base, parmi lesquelles se trouve l'électricité, l'eau, bien entendu les technologies de l'information et de la communication, les autres services sociaux que sont la santé, l'éducation et autres. Parlant du développement de l'électricité est développée pour améliorer les conditions de vie. Donc il faut prendre en compte la dimension humaine. Dans la prise en compte de la dimension humaine, il faut prendre des énergies respectueuses de l'environnement, donc des énergies renouvelables. Et dans la production de l'eau, il faut utiliser des techniques et des technologies respectueuses de l'environnement. Le défi aujourd'hui en Afrique, au lieu d'être lié à la gestion de l'électricité, il est au niveau de la production de l'électricité. Mon collègue de Ericsson vient de dire tout à l'heure que nous avons un taux de pénétration de moins de 30% de l'électricité en Afrique. C'est pourquoi les chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine, au sortir de la COP21 qui a eu lieu en 2015 à Paris, se sont entendus à Addis Abeba pour créer l'initiative africaine sur les énergies renouvelables. Cette initiative africaine sur les énergies renouvelables a eu l'endossement de l'ensemble des pays. Il y a eu une gouvernance qui a été mise en place, qui passe par un conseil d'administration, par un comité technique de pilotage et une structure de mobilisation et de gestion des ressources qui est la Banque africaine de développement. Donc, quand on parle des énergies renouvelables, on pense bien entendu à l'hydroélectricité, on pense bien entendu à l'énergie solaire, on pense aux énergies produites par les biomasses. Mais la plupart de ces énergies ont besoin d'investissements massifs. Ces investissements massifs ne sont pas accessibles par certains pays individuellement pris. C'est pourquoi on a besoin de mutualiser nos efforts pour faire des projets régionaux intégrateurs qui, au lieu d'avoir une dimension nationale, une dimension communautaire, une dimension villageoise, peuvent être financés dans une approche régionale, dans une approche continentale, pour que, une fois la production est faite, bien entendu, on fera après, on pourra développer les défis liés à la distribution, la consommation et au retour sur investissement. Et cette initiative des chefs d'État se repose sur des mécanismes de mise en œuvre au niveau des communautés économiques régionales. Par exemple, si je prends le cas de la CEDEAO, laquelle communauté appartient à mon pays, se trouve le West African Power Pool. L'objectif, c'est l'interconnexion des réseaux, c'est le développement mutualisé des infrastructures de production énergétique pour faire face aux besoins des différents pays. Mon pays, la Guinée, on l'a toujours appelé château d'eau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Nous avons plus de 1300 cours d'eau. La plupart des grands fleuves de l'Afrique de l'Ouest prennent leur source dedans. Nous avons l'un des plus connus, le fleuve Niger. Vous avez le fleuve Sénégal, la Gambie. Quand vous voulez développer des infrastructures énergétiques, il est fondamental d'avoir une approche régionale. Il est fondamental d'avoir une approche qui tienne compte du respect de l'environnement, qui tient compte de la diversité des besoins. Parce qu'on produit de l'énergie pour le développement industriel et on produit de l'énergie pour la consommation des ménages. La problématique de la est moins importante que la capacité des pays à mobiliser des ressources pour produire de l'énergie. Parce que même quand vous voulez appliquer une technologie, acquérir cette technologie, il faut avoir des ressources. Des ressources pour l'acquisition de technologie, des ressources pour former les humains dans le cadre du transfert de compétences, des ressources pour développer les réseaux de distribution, des ressources pour développer des mécanismes de recouvrement de cette énergie qui est mise à la disposition des citoyens. C'est là et la production énergétique, on va parler d'une approche intelligente dans la distribution, la gestion, la mise à disposition de cette énergie. Parce que vous ne pouvez pas parler d'intelligence dans la distribution s'il n'y a pas de production massive. C'est là que les technologies de l'information et de la communication peuvent être appliquées pour aider à une meilleure gestion de la production énergétique, à une meilleure gestion de la distribution énergétique, à une meilleure gestion même de la consommation des ménages. Et les mêmes facilités, les mêmes approches peuvent être appliquées à la distribution de l'eau, aux mesures de la qualité de l'eau. Parce qu'il peut y arriver des incidents, que la qualité de l'eau soit perturbée, qu'il y ait des dysfonctionnements au niveau des réseaux de distribution d'eau, mais vous devez avoir des possibilités de remonter ces informations à un niveau décentralisé de préférence, comme il l'a dit, pour que les interventions soient beaucoup plus proches des zones de consommation. Donc aujourd'hui, comme nous sommes en train de parler de Transform Africa, pour nous, au niveau politique, les approches doivent être des approches collégiales, des approches régionales, des approches intégrées, et c'est au niveau de ces approches que nous devons mettre beaucoup plus d'intelligence pour faire en sorte qu'on ne duplique pas ou qu'on ne fasse pas des investissements qui ne tiennent pas compte effectivement des besoins des consommateurs.
So that actually leads very well to the question I had for you. So there's a lot of effort in Africa on power pools and integrated power system, but there's also a lot of discussion about decentralized and micro solutions. And why don't you tell us what you have here before?
Sure. Actually, before I even jump to this, I do want to address kind of the higher level of the question and of the comments made by my fellow panelists here regarding the need to think about infrastructure and the development and the resources before you can even push for a smart solution. I 100% agree with him, but I think that it's very important to really highlight what we mean by infrastructure development. To me, what really set Africa apart and made a few people, the smart people, think about what could be different here, what could be beyond groundbreaking, but just kind of really a perfect example of what's possible here, was the leapfrogging that we saw with cell phone technology and mobile technology. People saw that we needed a way to communicate, and that if we were waiting for landlines to be a solution, it wouldn't make sense. And so beyond something being decentralized, I mean, we now have a solution that's a web of flexible connectivity. To me, it is almost hilarious when I hear that despite the fact that we saw that perfect example of us trying to do the normal solution, but it didn't work, so we leapfrogged with mobile technology, that we still are attempting to do the same things with renewable energy. For me, we have a perfect example, again, to leapfrog and to actually look at innovations that aren't kind of just copycats of what works in other places, but actually don't work here because of the terrain, because of what you might expect when you think about the current situation on the continent. But in reality, we have the opportunity to actually show the world what's possible and what's the future for energy in terms of thinking about that infrastructure, and really being smart in the way that we develop it. So for me, our perspective on Uncharted Play is that the solution is to think small, not big. You know, it's funny, when you really look into the energy space and you really dig into it, most people haven't questioned a lot since the days of Nikola Tesla. In fact, if you even push the people who write the textbooks on how to build a generator or a motor, if you really push them, they'll just say, oh, well, this is just how it's been done for so long. And so the way things have been done is very much a top-down approach. You try to get a huge solar farm, or a huge wind farm, or huge whatever, and the goal is you just integrate so much power. I'm using the word huge for a reason. If anyone knows about American politics, you just want it huge. You just want it huge. And that's great. Yeah, fine. You know, and it's top down, and you generate so much power that you don't even know what to do with it, and you can't store it, and it's wasteful. And when you bring that here, it's expensive. And that's the problem. It's expensive, whether it's connecting to the grid or developing these large-scale renewable energy projects. it's not cost effective, so people are still doing the makeshift things that they do to keep going each day. However, you know, one thing my father always tells me is whether you're asking one person for $1 million or 1 million people for $1, in the end you still end up with $1 million. So why haven't we thought about energy generation in that same perspective? We're talking about, you know, democratizing energy access. We should be thinking about how we can efficiently harness micro packets of energy and combine that, aggregate that, so you can still get meaningful power. But what you also get is a solution that's customizable, a solution that meets the needs of the people because it's part of the way that people are living their lives. That's how we're harnessing it. And so for us, we chose to focus on kinetic energy. It's not the only solution when we think about micro power and harnessing micro power, but it's something that we felt was an opportunity because as you look at the growth of cities, as you look at the growth in the population, as you look at the growth in urbanization, we wanted to create a solution that was synergistic with that. A solution when you're thinking about the tragedy of the commons and where you're going to get the resources to meet the needs of the city. We wanted to create a solution that as there's growth in this city, you actually get more power, you get what you need. So we started out, you know, gosh, for me, 10 years ago, when I was 19, I invented an energy generating soccer ball. So literally, just a soccer ball that you could play with, and then it actually harnessed that power, that, you know, energy from motion, and stored it inside the ball so it can be used as an off-grid power source. A year later, I created an energy generating jump rope. It's gender neutral, but yes, kind of designed for the girls who really want to kick butt at double dutch. And again, just jumping rope, normal play, can generate power for hours of light, something basic that can be used in villages and communities, all clean, renewable energy. From there, we scaled and we grew. We took this same core technology, we started to look at how we can put it into other play products and sports products, other normal consumer products, strollers, shopping carts, etc. And then expanded from there and started to look at how we can put it into infrastructure projects, or products rather, integrating it into speed bumps, into floor panels, into public utility furniture, so they can power street lights, power Wi-Fi beacons. And so I tell this story for two reasons. One, you know, as an example of how we're looking at addressing this issue, because of course you can now start to combine these products that we create to literally create microgrids of power that can serve communities and combine them with other types of renewable energy. But also as an example of, I think, how we need to be supporting innovation in this space. The problem we have right now in energy is that you have people who are tinkering, people who are kind of inventing in their lab or in their room, or, you know, sometimes just wherever they can get some materials. In Nigeria, I've seen kids pull supplies from the local dump just to create something makeshift. And then you have the solutions that are being kind of supported and pushed by the major agencies, the established solutions that aren't really innovative, they're just kind of pushing for scale. And currently there is no clear path on how to get from A to Z. Incentivize the development and usher in this innovation and create the milestones so that these innovators, these entrepreneurs can scale and grow with the continent. We will not only have a solution that makes what just happened never happen again, we'll have a solution that basically teaches the world how to really think about a smart future, because the technology itself is developed with a steady, smart mindset. And truly a scaled approach. I think that's the scalability, and that growth is critical. If Thomas Edison had to create that light bulb and the first shot, we would all be sitting in the darkness. He had to create something much simpler first and scale there, and I think that's what's critical when you're thinking about energy innovation.
So I'll have a follow-up question for you, but I want to go to that side of the world, of our world here. Ericsson is spending a lot on information technology, the Internet of Things, and when I think of the Internet of Things, you're always thinking about appliances that talk to each other, the thing that you can control the lights of your house. But the Internet of Things probably is bigger than that. How do you see
And then if you look on the Internet of Things, specific is obviously, it does bring the two elements obviously into the industry or into the sector. It's about how do we create maximum efficiency, how do we realize effectiveness, and then also maybe the third point I'll talk to as well is that how do we realize security? Because obviously when we get into the point of the Internet of Things, if we look into the being either the energy or being the water sector, number one is that you need to be able to generate or clean the water in a much effective way. So you need to have either microgrids that have the capability to be able to inject into the networks. So which means now, as we said, Africa has got a lot of sun. We just saw the innovation around how people can be able to generate energy. And that the question becomes, how do you then interconnect all those points in such a way that there could be a communication of demand and supply? So which means if I've got a house that is roofed with solar panels, can you imagine if we have all these villages roofed with solar panels, and then those villages during the day, they are back to work. So which means when they are back to work, most of the people are working, then they can be able to sell the energy that is generated by their houses into the main grid, which then supplies the factories that they are working at that demands more energy during the day. And then you can see how then the house starts to look completely different. And then obviously when they get home as well, they could be able to see and say, you know, today I don't need to cook, so therefore I don't need a lot of energy. I can be able to put my energy and procure my energy. Whoever wants to pick up the energy can be able to be sold on the grid, and then can be able to be made available to the person that needs it. So the IoT then gives you that capability to be able to do that. And then the other thing as well, obviously, that the era of the IoT gives you is the whole issue that, number one, if you look at home, when you use different appliances, they use energy in a different way. So therefore, if you reach a point where, as an energy service provider, you say we have got a critical issue, then we need to be able to can supply energy to a particular area. I mean, like today, being in this convention center is a very important event. Probably you need to prioritize energy to be able to be here. Therefore, you are able to then warn your citizens around and say, please, between this time and this time, because I demand more energy, do not use your geysers. And you know, normally as people, sometimes when you tell them, they will still leave them switched on, even if they know they'll use them in the morning. What you can do with the IoT is that then you can be able to send a signal that can be able to stop the geysers operating at that particular point in time that you need the energy. And then in that, that helps you the ability to be able to do that. Then if you look on the second other side of it as well, is that most of the time you find that on the lower grids and that those things are not connected, they are not put into the ICT world, but basically those devices, those transformers that you see up there, those are very important things to be able to be connected, and for a number of things. Obviously today, you do have a bit of a challenge in most parts of the continent where you realize that there is a heavy copper market that has opened up itself there that creates now and then that people suffer energy shortage, not because the government is not generating enough energy. there is enough energy generated, but people are stealing the cables. And then what do you do? Or people get faults. I mean, I was surprised when we looked into this sector to hear that sometimes when for people to be able to find the fault when somebody calls and say, I don't have an energy, or a block don't have an energy, somebody has to drive around to go and find out what is the problem. Therefore, if you have then put the right IoTs into those things, they are able to automatically detect for you where's the problem. And then they would either then give feedback to the control center and say, this is a problem, but I have tried to fix the problem. In what I've done now, I've rerouted the traffic of the energy through this route. Therefore, this route will be heavily overloaded, but it can only handle so many hours of that particular energy. So that's what then obviously the world of the IoT start to give us. If you look on the investment that has been done on the big pylons that are running through the bushes, running through the villages, running through the roads, the question, if you look on some of the issues that you have to deal with today, is about obviously animals, it's about sometimes dealing with wrong people that will be going in there, tampering with those systems. IoT then brings you that capability to be able to then say, how do I put security so that I can be able to see wherever I am, so that I don't have to be dispatching a vehicle where it has to drive around to go and monitor and say, oh, are these towers still intact? Are they still able to hold? So obviously during that period of driving, you can imagine how much you're paying in fuel to be able to do that. So if you deploy cameras and the sensors that are able to tell you and say, look, everything is still okay, or there is a problem, send someone to be able to investigate. So that is where the whole era of IoT start to make a big difference. And one of the examples just to give as well is that when you enter the substations for safety perspective, most of the procedures in the service providers is that then people must enter the substations, being 2 or 3 people in case something happens. They can't be, and if you look and then obviously one person is just there to be a safeguard in case something goes wrong, then he can be able to call. Then why can't you do that with IoT? Because obviously with technology it can enable you to be able to know, I have dispatched this vehicle. When it arrives in the vicinity of the substation, there is a recognition. It tells it and say, okay, yes, that's the right vehicle. You can be able to take, yes, this guy is supposed to be here. Everything kicks, and then if he gets into the substation and that they told him, please work in that area, and then he goes into a wrong area, it can tell someone in the control center and say, obviously this person is not going where the fault is. And somebody can intervene and be able to can monitor and say, what is happening, what is going wrong. So now you've got a third person that is not a third person in every dispatch, but it's a third person in a center, where then it becomes a third person in multiple dispatch. Therefore, then it gives you the resources as a service provider to be able to say, then how do I plant my resources in another area as well. So I think IoT does play quite a big role in this space. And I think going forward, it presents an opportunity for the continent to be able to come up with those sensors, come up with those devices that then talks to the nature or the solutions that are required to be able to be solved in this continent. And the other thing that IoT gives you, which is a very big important thing, is that it leaves footprint. Every footprint is picked up, and then that is where now it brings you to this whole issue of big data. So today, I think most of the times we predict based on the old models or other things that sometimes takes time to be able to be researched. But then IoT gives you every time a point of information to say this is what is happening in your network, this is what is happening there. And through smart analytics, where now we are talking of data scientists, then they start to give us information where we are now starting to plan much more better informed. And then we are reducing the level of accuracy, we are targeting the resources, we are targeting the investments much more better.
So I also have a follow-up question for you. But I know Mr. Bauer has to leave because he's going to lose his flight. This panel was originally scheduled for 1:15, and then it got changed. And so before you leave, I was hoping you can answer one last question that I will also ask from all the other panels after you leave.
Thank you.
Financing seems to be a big problem in the region. How do you think we can overcome the challenges of financing these infrastructure systems? What's the role of government, of the private sector, of aid organizations? And in your case, specifically on the water?
It's a great question, and it's a tough one to answer, honestly, because there's no simple solution. it needs to be a blend of government, private sector, and the World Bank, African Development Bank. And we've been talking this afternoon, actually here in Rwanda, about pulling some packages together for significant funding for the water infrastructure. And it's difficult. We as a private company prepared to take some risk, but everybody wants a sovereign guarantee. That's quite difficult for the countries to give in terms of restrictions from the IMF. So it's a challenge. What we're doing here, and in order to get some of the urgent work done, is we took a risk, and we've provided soft financing to the Rwandan government in terms of extended payment terms to enable those projects, the urgent projects, to go ahead. But I think it's going to be a continuing challenge.
Sorry, I'm not sure what this says.
Okay.
So in the government, the project here, it was the company took a longer-term vision and took a risk.
Yes.
So we need more companies like yours.
But it's not possible for us to do that all of the time or everywhere. So we're having to take a balanced portfolio of the risk, and we looked at the country risk here, we looked at the business climate and the track record we'd got here. So we were very confident to do that. But even in other countries where we would be equally as confident, our balance sheet is limited too.
So I know you have to go.
Thank you. I apologize.
But thank you for being here and staying until so late.
Thank you.
And rushing to the airport.
Thank you very much.
Got it. So they want me to announce that their gala dinner is happening tonight at 7 p.m. at Camp Kigali, and this is for people that have the gold and platinum ticket. With that out of the way, I will go back to you and to you at one point, but the question I have for you is, what is the role of policy? We talk about innovation in energy, innovation in water. What are opportunities to innovate in policy?
Merci. Peut-être avant de parler des opportunités d'innovation, je voudrais revenir à la question ou au commentaire de mon frère Direction sur Internet of Things. C'est fondamental. C'est d'ailleurs, moi je suis ministre de l'économie numérique, c'est ce que je défends. Mais nous parlons d'un continent où on a au moins 70% de la population qui n'a pas accès à l'électricité. Donc on a un déficit de production. La première chose, la priorité, c'est d'abord de faire face au déficit de production. Comment produire? Bien entendu, dans le processus de production, dans l'élaboration des différentes politiques, des différentes stratégies pour produire l'énergie, pour satisfaire les besoins de l'industrialisation du continent, les besoins des ménages, il y a le fait qu'il faille développer les technologies de l'information, qu'il faille développer des applications qui permettent de produire différemment, de distribuer différemment et de consommer différemment. Mais la problématique aujourd'hui, dans un continent, encore une fois, plus de 70% n'a pas accès à l'électricité, c'est comment produire. Et comment produire intelligemment, comment produire autrement. Comment mobiliser les ressources nécessaires pour faire face à ces investissements massifs. Parce qu'il n'y a aucun État africain, aucun, qui a atteint l'autosuffisance énergétique. Aucun. Alors que nous avons des infrastructures potentielles, nous avons une richesse potentielle. Si je prends Inga en République démocratique du Congo, qui a des potentialités très immenses. Mais l'histoire a démontré que la seule République démocratique du Congo n'a pas l'architecture institutionnelle requise, n'a pas les moyens en termes de ressources matérielles et humaines requis pour pouvoir développer Inga. Quand je prends mon pays, nous avons toutes les potentialités hydroélectriques, mais nous n'avons pas les moyens. Donc il faut imaginer des mécanismes innovants pour pouvoir mettre un dispositif de mutualisation des ressources, mais pour mettre encore un mécanisme de partenariat, pour revenir à votre question de partenariat, public-public ou public-privé. Il faudrait que le privé trouve un environnement propice, un environnement attractif. C'est là où on interpelle les différents États, parce qu'il est de leur responsabilité de mettre en place des politiques d'investissement qui sécurisent l'investissement étranger, des politiques qui permettent de promouvoir un environnement attractif. Parce que sans environnement attractif, sans politique qui permet de drainer les investissements étrangers, nous ne pouvons pas faire face à la construction de ces infrastructures. C'est bien. Comme l'a dit mon frère, après, bien entendu, Internet of Things, ça vous permet de mieux gérer ces services. Mais pour gérer un service, il faut que le service existe déjà. Et le défi auquel nous faisons face en Afrique, c'est d'abord la mise à disposition des services. C'est la production de l'énergie. C'est la production des quantités d'eau suffisantes pour la consommation domestique. Et bien entendu, tout à l'heure, peut-être qu'il y a une erreur. Il ne s'agit pas de construire les infrastructures et après parler des applications, mais il s'agit de mettre la priorité dans la construction des infrastructures qui permettent, encore une fois, de faire face aux besoins de l'industrialisation du continent. Parce que quand on parle d'une ville intelligente, c'est une ville qui crée de l'emploi. C'est une ville qui sécurise la population. C'est une ville qui protège l'environnement. C'est une ville qui permet d'évaluer et de satisfaire les besoins des populations en termes de services de base. Pour qu'on puisse satisfaire les besoins des populations en termes de services de base, pour qu'on puisse créer de l'emploi, pour qu'on puisse fournir toutes sortes de possibilités aux citoyens de vivre décemment tout en respectant l'environnement, il faut disposer de moyens. Il faut pousser l'industrialisation du continent, il faut mobiliser des ressources. C'est en cela, aujourd'hui, je suis d'accord avec vous, qu'il va falloir repenser nos politiques économiques, repenser nos politiques de développement des infrastructures, repenser même nos politiques de partenariat, que ce soit public-public ou public-privé, pour un développement accéléré et cohérent des infrastructures énergétiques, d'adduction d'eau et même des infrastructures de télécommunications, de TIC et de toutes ces applications qui permettent demain de dire que nos villes sont des villes intelligentes. Il faut d'abord que les villes puissent disposer du minimum, je pense. C'est parce que les problématiques ne sont pas les mêmes. On a souvent ces discussions au niveau de l'Union internationale des télécoms, au niveau de partenaires occidentaux. Nous avons d'abord la problématique de satisfaction des besoins primaires. Il faut créer des conditions de satisfaction de ces besoins et après, bien entendu, venir avec des applications qui permettent de parfaire, d'améliorer, de satisfaire davantage, parce qu'aujourd'hui, on va dire qu'on est satisfait, demain les besoins vont commencer encore à croître et à croître et à croître. Je pense que...
So can I interrupt, because I have a question to follow up.
Yes, sure.
First, under your definition of a smart city, we have a lot of smart cities in the developed world, even though they have no data collection in no Internet of Things, but they're providing services without any of the ICT-enabled technologies. But my question is more, is it a zero-sum game? There is no disagreement that we need to build the infrastructure. We need to be able to provide energy and water services. But the way you've described it, it seems like you're suggesting we need to focus first on building the things, and then we can think about how we bring in the Internet of Things. But the challenge has been in developed countries. I live in the US. I'm not from the US, but I lived in the US. You're from the US. We are spending a lot of brain power and a lot of resources in trying to figure out how to bring the Internet of Things into this legacy infrastructure, right? That we built 100 years ago with the intention of our goal is just to provide energy services. And if it is a zero-sum, is it really a zero-sum game? Couldn't Africa be thinking about, yes, obviously, we need to build the energy infrastructure, but is there a way to build that energy infrastructure that already makes it IoT ready, that already makes use of IoT technology, that already makes use of things we've learned from IT technology? It just seems like it's not a zero-sum game.
If I wear my coat of Minister in charge of ICT and digital economy, I will say that let's invest to develop Internet of Things. But how do you develop Internet of Things if you don't have energy?
But isn't
How
the
do you
Internet of Things?
how do you develop? How do you satisfy needs in urban areas, even in rural areas, if you don't have energy? I do agree with I think Jessica that we may think differently on how we can come up with solutions. We have different solutions. We can come with small units. It's something that is scalable. We can say this small, medium, and big. But there's nothing in terms of ICT infrastructure, ICT applications that you can bring to households, that you can give facilities if you don't have minimum of energy. Today, one of the challenges that we're facing within the ICT sector is we're talking about energy for ICT. We have started thinking about the type of energy that can be developed to connect rural sites in rural areas, because when you come in a village of 100 people or a village of 500 people, you want to give internet, at least you need a base station, and that base station may not be connected to the major energy supply station, but you need to think about the type of energy that need to be installed to satisfy that specific need. But at any point, if you want to give any solution, ICT, water supply, and anything, at least you need to think smart on the type of energy that you need to come up with to satisfy that solution. I'm not saying that we should focus on building the infrastructure and then come with the applications or Internet of Things. I'm saying that to help us to do it differently, we need to apply ICT solutions, ICT facilities, but if we want build ICT, Internet of Things, and anything in urban and rural areas, we need to make sure that the basic is there. And today, the major challenge in Africa, when you look at all studies talking about Africa development, without energy, there's no development. Even a human being, if you don't have energy, you cannot wake up and walk. You need energy to work. You need energy to talk. You need even energy to sleep. So that's why we need first to make sure that we have the minimum of energy that can help us to face our different challenges to develop this continent.
Do either of you want to respond?
I can just say maybe not long on this one. I think it's something that you are bringing about a very important point that last week also came out at the World Economic Forum. I think we need to probably look carefully or maybe redefine or get a way on how do we bring the whole concept of Internet of Things into an African perspective. Because obviously there is a big scope for it, but I guess if maybe it gets looked at or defined at from a developed market perspective, then it can become irrelevant for the continent. So, but if you look on the use cases and the challenges that the continent is facing, there are some of these interventions that by bringing them in will help the continent better to be able to emerge out of some of the challenges that we are facing in the different sectors of the continent. So.
And I would just add, well, first of all, you speak English very well, sir. I was surprised.
I forgot I should speak French.
Speak English very well. I think that it's really more just a question of development with the IoT in mind versus leading with the IoT. I 100% understand where he's coming from. It's very hard to speak about the IoT when I have family members, my own family members, that don't have basically reading light. So it's hard to start talking about that. I think the goal, though, is that in developing this infrastructure, we must keep the future in mind so that we are not destined to be like the United States, really looking at the expense of retrofitting the IoT in, but instead we thought ahead and we have a modular, flexible system that actually is going to be ready for the IoT potentially even faster than what we're finding in the US.
Are there any mini-grid developers, solar home system developers in the audience? Because I have a question for so Yes, I agree with these, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper on these. So I work with mini-grid developers. Maybe if we get a microphone, I can figure out. They all operate because they have smart meters and smart like telecommunication that allows them to do remote payments. They wouldn't operate without ICT. Did we get a microphone? Who was?
I forgot to speak English.
So what company?
My name is Muntaga Keita. I'm the founder of Tulip Industries. I manufacture green kiosk. I came to realize that if I manufacture kiosk in Guinea, we don't have 100% electricity yet. We are almost there, but not 100%. So I just found out that my kiosk will run out of energy if the electricity goes off. So I made them green, just including like lithium batteries, so they can stay there for days, and people can use the internet and every other thing. I just came to the realization that most tools that we use at home today, even TVs, computers, internally they run on 5 volt or 12 volts. So maybe government can act on that, can force manufacturers to make their devices green.
Okay.
It's easy. I believe that's a solution. Another question is like...
No, hold on, because we're not up on questions. I had a question for you.
Okay, you go ahead.
So if you're, I think your colleague,
Yes.
do you say you work with a solar home system, or are you installing these systems?
No.
Okay.
She made a mistake.
Okay. So, but these systems, they operate with smart ICT capabilities already, and they wouldn't be taking place if that ability wasn't there.
Our technology as well, though, you know, so I think any type of microgrid system, you know, if you're going to do a micro energy generation technology, you need a system for connecting them and then monitoring them, and otherwise your operational costs are going to be too high to have that many decentralized systems.
Right.
So I think the point I was trying to make is not that we ignore the IoT, but that you build a system that keeps it in mind, and of course leverage the existing technologies there to build that system, but that the foundation still needs to be there. To his point, that you need to have a functioning energy system, a functioning water solution, just functioning infrastructure, ideally designed flexibly so that as additional IoT solutions make sense, they can fit right in. But it's hard to think about. I don't know. Like, you know, I'm trying to think about the things that are talked about in Silicon Valley that are, you know, they don't always make sense. It's hard to think about a pet, a robotic pet that ages with you, and like artificial intelligence, you know, or machine. It's hard to think about some of those things when there's still functional infrastructural issues that need to be addressed.
Right, so perhaps there is an issue of how do we define the Internet of Things for Africa, for the needs of Africa. We're not talking about my smart thermostat that is going to turn my air conditioning. That's what people maybe normally associate with the Internet of Things, and that's not what we're talking about here. So maybe that is something that we have found out in this panel. Do you have anything else about innovative policies?
In terms of innovation in setting up a policy, let me switch to French.
Okay.
I want Jessica to, take that one. Thank you. Je voudrais également revenir au niveau continental, parce que je suis convaincu que devant des défis qui sont presque communs à beaucoup de pays, il faut avoir des approches communes, il faut avoir une démarche coordonnée, il faut avoir la possibilité de mutualiser vos efforts. Au niveau de l'Union africaine, il y a quelques années, je crois que tous les membres du secteur privé sont au courant, il a été élaboré un document qu'on appelle Programme intégré pour le développement des infrastructures en Afrique, qui est le PIDA, qui a été, avec ses sous-composantes télécommunications TIC, l'eau, l'électricité, les transports terrestres, ferroviaires, aériens et autres. L'idée, c'était quoi? C'est de créer un mécanisme d'intégration de ces infrastructures pour minimiser les coûts, parce que ce à quoi nous assistons aujourd'hui dans les pays, nous reconnaissons tous que nous n'avons pas suffisamment de moyens, mais nos politiques de développement des infrastructures, les politiques sectorielles ne sont pas coordonnées, elles ne sont pas intégrées. Je prends un exemple simple qui se passe dans la plupart des pays africains. Il n'y a pas un qui déroge à cela, peut-être le Rwanda. Vous construisez une très belle route. Le plus souvent, quand on construit une route, on vient, on inaugure, tout le monde est content. Le lendemain, c'est la société d'électricité qui vient, elle veut poser des câbles, on déchire la route. Celle qui devait faire 20 ans, ne fait plus que 5 ans. On finit, on applaudit que l'infrastructure énergétique est faite. Une semaine après, c'est l'adduction d'eau qui vient déchirer à côté. La route ne peut plus faire que 2 ans. Un mois après, c'est les télécoms qui viennent déchirer de l'autre côté. La route ne peut plus faire 1 an. Si, au moment où l'électricité faisait, ils ne coupent pas les tuyaux de l'eau ou les télécoms ne coupent pas les autres. Alors que quand les politiques sont intégrées, au moment où on fait une route, on met tous les acteurs autour de la même table pour dire que nous faisons cette route qui relie les 2 grandes villes. Donc nous devons faire en sorte que dans la mise en œuvre de cette route, qu'on mette des infrastructures qui sont capables d'accueillir l'adduction d'eau, les câbles électriques, les câbles à fibre optique, les télécoms, et si c'est dans une ville, les tuyaux pour l'oxygène, vous le faites une fois pour toutes. Et en le faisant ainsi, vous faites une économie d'échelle de 65% minimum. 65% minimum. Et cette économie d'échelle, vous pouvez prendre cette économie et l'investir ailleurs. Cela suppose déjà qu'au niveau national, il existe une politique cohérente, des stratégies qui sont mises en place et qu'il y a un suivi dans le respect de ces stratégies. Quand cela existe, c'est à ce moment qu'on peut aller à l'échelle régionale. Sinon, c'est une utopie. Si on ne peut pas sécuriser une région, je vais parler par exemple de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, si les pays individuellement pris n'ont pas d'outils de gestion. Donc, au niveau de la politique, il faut mettre des politiques nationales transparentes, des politiques ouvertes à la population, et il faut que nous, qui sommes les décideurs politiques, nous soumettons à la rétribution, nous soumettons à rendre compte aux populations et impliquer la population à la base pour qu'elle fasse partie des phases de discussion quant au projet de développement à la base. Parce que sinon, on investit beaucoup d'argent. Si vous allez dans nos pays, on vous dit, les 10 dernières années, on a mis des milliards de dollars. Vous demandez où ça se trouve. Ça n'existe nulle part. Parce qu'une infrastructure détruit une autre. Un projet détruit un autre. Un régime vient annuler ce que l'autre a mis. Donc c'est autant de répétitions. Donc vous avez raison, il est fondamental d'avoir des politiques cohérentes, des politiques incitatives, des mécanismes de sécurisation de l'investissement étranger et avoir, si vous voulez, une fiscalité allégée, je n'ai pas dit d'avoir des zones de non-droit, mais une fiscalité transparente et allégée qui permet au secteur privé d'avoir la possibilité de prédire ce qui peut se passer dans 2 ans, 3 ans, 4 ans. Parce que nous ne sommes pas dans un mécanisme de philanthropie. Il ne faut pas se cacher la face. Nous avons toutes les bonnes volontés. Nous, gouvernements, ne pouvons plus faire face à tous les besoins des populations. Nous avons besoin d'une complicité, nous avons besoin d'un partenariat, nous avons besoin même d'une camaraderie avec le secteur privé. Mais sans oublier que le secteur privé, quand il vient pour faire du business. Donc il faut créer cet environnement propice au business. Certains de nos chefs d'État disaient, venez en Afrique faire du business, faites du profit, parce que le profit n'est pas mauvais. C'est parce que si vous ne faites pas du profit, vous ne viendrez pas. Donc nous devons nous faire en sorte que vous ayez envie de venir et que quand vous venez, vous faites du profit pour qu'ensemble nous puissions améliorer les conditions de vie de nos populations.
So I want to open it up for questions, but my last question, and we'll keep it short so we have more time for questions, is all of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult one, obviously, because the resources are scarce, and I think the continent with many challenges, there are too many priorities to be taken care of from a policy perspective. But I think one thing that I can say is that it's about the business model. I think we have to find the right business model because the demand is out there, the need is out there. The question is about how do we satisfy that need and in a way that it's sustainable. Because obviously once it generates returns, then you can be able to then plow it back. Obviously there are a couple of options in that. I mean, in some of the areas you talked about the smart metering, smart understanding, there are some of the markets that would go from a tariffing perspective to be able to obviously finance some of those automation. And then there are some of the markets that you could be getting from a subsidy perspective. And there's some of the markets that generally, because of the amount of the information that you have, you are able to mitigate a lot of losses that you are not able to monetize. Because one of the biggest problems is that when you face losses, what you do as a service provider, possibly they would, because to recover their costs, they keep on increasing the tariff, whereas most of the energy or the water gets lost on the way between that and the consumer. The question then is that if you build this infrastructure to be able to understand where my losses are and then be able to close those losses gaps, it means that those savings starts to be the savings that helps to be able to fund your automation program. Obviously, you still need to fund the generation or building the generation of energy and that. But I think the things like the IoT or ICT or automation gives you that opportunity. And then the other thing as well is about how you then also use the ICT to be able to influence the user behavior. Because obviously with that influencing the user behavior, it means you are able to make people to be aware that they should use it for what is important. And then what you save, then you can be able to connect more people. And then as you scale to more people, then it means obviously you're creating the revenue ability in the economy, because it's not only about, because once the people are connected to the energy, they create more energy, more economic activity, and then it means they are able to pay, and then you're able to then look into that. So it's a PPP or a public-private partnership that needs to be looked into. And then obviously in some of the instances, market differ. Somewhere you're going to have to think about how do you create a monopoly in time 0 to time 1, so that I can be able to make a business case for the monopoly to be able to invest and create returns, and then how do I unbundle and open up the market? Because one of the problems sometimes is you would create a policy that allows certain recovery, but if you don't stop at a particular time, then it becomes a bad thing going forward. So those are the kind of maybe some of the things that needs to be looked at. I mean, if the state, then yes, there's a sovereign bond to be able to fund it. That's the easier part, but the reality is that, as I said, the states have got too many priorities, and the private sector is out there looking for projects to do, but the projects that will make returns. And the question is, how do you create that balance as well?
So I'm actually joined here today by Uncharted Play's strategic financial advisor, Dana Reed. And, you know, I actually want to punt this question to her, and then maybe it'll be a nice segue into audience questions, because this is what she's spent her life doing, African project finance, and that's why she works with us, because that's not my area of expertise. So Dana, please, if there's a microphone. She's sitting right up here in front.
Hi, so this was not planned, but I can tell you about my experience. There's a gap between the good financeable projects and private capital. So yes, absolutely public-private partnerships, but there is a ton of private capital that just, they don't know where to put it. They don't know where to place it. They don't know how hire the right consultants to do feasibility studies to de-risk these things. And so the inherent problem is identifying that bottleneck, which is why I tend to work with companies like Jessica's, because, I mean, we live in New York, and people back home all the time are saying, where are the deals? And I'm like looking at my desk like there's too many. And so there's almost just a small communication gap between, I would say, call it 3 continents, Africa, Europe, and the States, where, there's tons of money, just the capital doesn't know where to be placed. And then when you identify the capital, is there the expertise to do the appropriate diligence to navigate different markets? Again, this goes back to a lot of people back home think this is just one marketplace. It's not. And so there's a lot of education that has to happen, and there's just frankly a lot of hustle. A lot of what I do with Jessica is going to have a ton of meetings to educate the hedge funds, the private equity groups, the high net worth individuals, that are afraid to sort of understand what the continent means, and getting in front of them and then bringing them here and showing them all of these opportunities. And it's almost that simple. And so I would say, I don't know if this is the exact answer, what you're looking for, but this is the reality. And so it's getting the right people in the right room to come and look at these projects and to understand them.
Perfect. What she said.
Yeah.
There you go. Thanks, Dana.
Sounds like academia. But now let's open it. We have about 15 minutes. Let's open it up for questions. And if no one has questions, then I'll ask more.
Thank you. My name is Josephine. I'm an architect and an urban designer. I'm Kenyan, but I live in Rwanda, where I also teach at the university. Thank you, Jessica, for these bottom-up interventions. That's the world I belong in. And when we teach and when we do research, I think for me the biggest disappointment is that the African city has decided not to learn from this bottom up, but we are every day running up and down, looking for the top down. So it's 50, 60 years after the colonial rule, but we have refused to decolonialize. I will give you an example. What I mean by decolonization. So for example, the city's inspiration is what we call the urban fantasies. And it's not, I think Kigali is a bit exceptional. If you look at cities in the region, we want to copy and paste Shanghai, Manhattan, Dubai. When we do this, we end up with glass, aluminum. Look at the amount of emitted energy and emitted aluminum that we do with these buildings. In the long run, we spend huge amounts of energy to cool down these structures because they get really hot. For the scientists that understand the greenhouse gas effect and things like this. And then we sit in big meetings and we still keep on sharing our frustrations that we don't have enough resources. We don't have 70% of our population cannot access electricity. And I look at Africa. What we have here is land, agricultural land. What is not agricultural is very, very productive. Look at the Sahara. What is the percentage of our deserts? What can they do? If we put solar panels on the deserts, we can produce enough for ourselves and to export to the global north. So I think we need to start looking much more inside and what we have and how can we transform what we have. In the end, we solve the problem and we actually produce even for the global north. Thank you.
Hi. Hello. My name is Tiano Montega Diarra, actually from the African Development Bank. I have one comment and one question though. One of my comments is about what I'm calling smart projects. In fact, the minister was mentioning the fact that we don't have the basic infrastructure. Basically, what I understood from that is that as if we need to prioritize. Now that we don't have the infrastructure, let's invest on bringing energy first, then we're thinking about ICT. Maybe it's not that, the minister can clarify for me. But for me, at the point we are today, in fact, when we're doing project on energy or when we're doing project on water, we do know that ICT brings value to those areas. In fact, for example, on energy pace, actually, when you're doing a project on energy, we know that we can use IoTs and ICTs to decrease the level of waste of energy. Same with water, actually. So why don't we think about, doing smart projects? When we do big infrastructure projects, make sure that you have an ICT component to actually tackle specific issues on those infrastructure that we're building, in fact. So innovators, those young innovators can bring their ideas to actually bring values into our infrastructures projects. The second thing is about the African Development Bank itself. In fact, we do have an ICT operation division, in fact, that was created a few years back. But if we look at it, the portfolio of projects that the countries are asking is very little compared to the other projects, in fact, mainly the agriculture, water, infrastructure. I can understand, because of the priority, but what's happening, in fact, is the Minister of ICTs, are they not strong enough to push the agenda of ICT, or I want to understand that.
La question.
Merci, Monsieur Diarra. En fait, le premier commentaire, il ne s'agit pas de faire de la construction des infrastructures de façon isolée, c'est-à-dire construire les infrastructures énergétiques, construire les autres infrastructures, et puis venir construire les infrastructures du TIC de télécom. J'ai pris l'exemple tout à l'heure, j'ai imagé la route. Si vous faites un à un, vous dépensez beaucoup plus que si vous le faites en même temps. Il faut avoir une approche intégrée. Ça réduit les coûts, ça vous donne une certaine marge, ce que j'ai appelé tout à l'heure comme étant une économie d'échelle que vous dégagez, et celle-ci vous permet d'investir ailleurs. Ça, si vous le faites un à un, c'est mal fait. Il faut avoir une approche intégrée. S'agissant du portefeuille TIC de la Banque africaine de développement, ça peut partir un peu de l'histoire. Vous savez qu'au moment où il y a eu les réformes dans nos pays, la plupart des institutions financières ont demandé à ce que le secteur des télécoms et TIC ne soit pas présenté par les États parce que le secteur privé était présent, il investissait, il faisait tout. Il n'y a pas longtemps que les pays ont commencé à investir eux-mêmes dans le développement des infrastructures parce que malheureusement les opérateurs privés dans le secteur des télécommunications n'investissaient que dans les secteurs où le taux de rentabilité est très élevé, où le retour sur investissement est rapide. Mais quand on compare le chemin qu'il faut parcourir pour mobiliser des ressources pour faire face à des besoins d'investissement dans le secteur des infrastructures routières, dans le secteur des infrastructures portuaires ou les autres infrastructures d'adduction d'eau ou d'énergie, et celui qu'on emprunte pour mobiliser les ressources pour le secteur des TIC, c'est différent. C'est très différent. Le partenariat public-privé est rapide dans le secteur de développement des infrastructures TIC. Le secteur privé est beaucoup plus présent dans le développement des infrastructures, des applications et des services de TIC. Mais rares, extrêmement rares, sont les acteurs du secteur privé qui viennent investir dans les routes, dans les autres infrastructures de base, parce que c'est très coûteux et le retour sur investissement est très lent. Le taux de rentabilité est très faible. C'est pourquoi, quand les États font leur politique, c'est de la politique. Ce qu'on transmet à la Banque mondiale, à la Banque africaine de développement, à la Banque mondiale, aux partenaires publics, ce sont nos priorités en termes de développement d'infrastructures que nous ne pouvons pas satisfaire dans le cadre d'un partenariat avec le privé traditionnel. Ce n'est pas parce que les TIC ne sont pas des priorités. Si vous regardez dans la plupart de nos pays, pour les 10 dernières années, parce que nous faisons les statistiques au niveau africain et au niveau mondial, les flux d'investissement qu'il y a eu dans le secteur des TIC sont beaucoup plus élevés que la somme des investissements qu'on a fait dans les routes, l'eau, l'électricité et autres. Donc ce n'est pas que ce n'est pas une priorité, c'est que nous avons, pour ce qui est de la Banque africaine de développement, beaucoup plus de priorités. Je pense que vous n'étiez pas ici quand j'ai parlé de l'initiative africaine pour les énergies renouvelables. Pour sensibiliser les institutions de financement telles que la Banque africaine de développement, nous avons accepté que les fonds soient domiciliés à la Banque africaine de développement. Et celui qui championne cette initiative, c'est le président Alpha Condé. Ça a amené la Banque africaine de développement à aller ouvrir un bureau national, un bureau Banque africaine de développement à Conakry, il y a 3 semaines. Parce que nous avons plus besoin d'instruments tels que ceux de la Banque africaine de développement pour mobiliser les ressources pour ce secteur, pour lequel le secteur privé traditionnel ne se bouscule pas. On ne fera pas ça pour les TIC. Si vous avez suivi avant-hier, pardon, la réunion du comité de pilotage de Smart Africa, nous avons un volet mobilisation de ressources où notre objectif c'est 300 milliards dans le cadre de la coopération avec la Chine, avec la Corée et autres. Aujourd'hui, qui est le premier bailleur de fonds en Chine? C'est Exim Bank, c'est Bank of China, c'est autres. Allez-y avec une liste de 10 projets. Mettez les TIC à la fin. Le soir, après la discussion, les TIC sont validés avant les autres projets. Donc, comme on sait qu'on valide plus facilement les TIC avec les autres, nous mettons la priorité sur les autres secteurs avec les institutions financières que nous pensons être des institutions financières domestiques qui comprennent les problématiques africaines. Donc ce n'est pas une question de priorité numéro 1, priorité numéro 2, c'est une question d'intelligence dans la stratégie qu'il faut mettre en place pour aller mobiliser les ressources. There's someone there.
So we have time for one more question, and then if anyone, maybe you can reach out to the panel after, but they're telling me I only have.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. It was quite brilliant. I'm coming from a completely different background. But I have interest in all of this because we talk about sustainable development. And for sustainable development, we really have to focus on the human dimension. And as I listen to all the needs that have to be met, the challenges, the human factor is what really creates even the costs, both in terms of behavior, but also in terms of the knowledge and the skills gap. The fact that Africa cannot, until now, get out of this heavy dependence on knowledge from outside and skills and competencies from outside tells us that there is something that is missing. And much as we agree to this idea of smart cities, smart village, etc., you cannot develop Africa. You cannot get Africa to where it should be if really we continue to maintain over 50%, 60% of the population as illiterate. So for me, I want to ask the panelists, what can you do with universities so that some of these skills and competencies would be developed by universities, research, etc.? For me, that's my problem. As I sit here listening, I feel a gap analysis will tell you that we will go nowhere. And 10 years, we will come back discussing the same issues because there is a knowledge gap. Thank you.
Okay. So our panel members have to go. Thanks for coming this late. Thank you. Are you going to be here? Are you going to be here tomorrow? Tomorrow. So you can look for her tomorrow if you want to talk to her. We're done. Oh.
Thank you very much.